to move on and talk to you about a governor who is maybe not as originally conservative as I thought. And that's Governor Rick Scott down in Florida. Have this piece here talking about his position on climate change. And this is in the Orlando Sentinel. And Scott Maxwell writes this article. It's titled Rick Scott on Climate Change. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a scientist. Well, I'm not a scientist. It writes, just a few years ago, Rick Scott was clear as day. He believed climate change was a hoax. Rick Scott says, I've not been convinced that there's any man-made climate change. Nothing's convinced me that there is. Yet now Scott has decided to take a new stance. He says, I'm not a scientist. It's a sentence he said over and over yesterday when refusing to directly answer questions about a topic that has become a dividing line in American politics, and one that Scott's opponent, Charlie Crist, is happy to talk about. The Miami Herald did a couple pieces documenting Scott's new position, and says whether Scott has actually changed his position or is now just simply scared to state what his position is remains to be seen. But if Scott is deferring to scientists, then his answer should be pretty clear-cut. The vast majority of scientists say human action undeniably affects the climate. And then Scott Maxwell cites some NASA evidence from this article too. He concludes the article by saying, from a political standpoint though, Scott should probably just pick a position and voice it. Most politicians and elected officials already have. Besides, in Politics 101, it says if you state your position, it's a story for a day. However, if you refuse to state your position, it's a story every day until you do. So my take on all this is Rick Scott, he does need to state his position on climate change. He needs to be honest with the voters in Florida and say what's on his mind. And what I would want him to say is, yes, there is climate change. It happens 4 times a year. It's called seasons. Let's see. Right now we're heading into summer. It's going to be really hot and humid. Now we're going to go into fall. It's going to cool down. The leaves are going to change. And then we have winter. Brrr, cold, especially last year here in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a mess. Then we have spring. Probably my favorite time of the year because the flowers bloom and the trees all look nice and filled with leaves, and it's warmer than the winter. And dry too. Usually here in the South, spring is very dry. So yeah, 4 seasons. That's climate change, okay? And also, as an evangelical Christian, I believe that God created the heavens and the earth, and that He created the seasons. So if you live in Florida, you have 2 seasons. You have dry and warm, which lasts from October through the end of May. And then in the summer you have from late May until the early part of October. You have oppressive heat and humidity every day, and usually in the middle of the afternoon you have severe thunderstorms. The sea breeze in the center part of the state, the atmosphere there builds up, and as you can tell, I'm not a meteorologist by any means. But that creates the thunderstorms there. So that's what Rick Scott should stay. Instead of just being this mushy, moderate person who is scared to articulate his positions. That's why the Republicans have lost the last 2 elections. We have not sent anybody who can articulate our positions.